Welcome to Excel 2010 Business Math video number 11. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, Business 210 Business Math Chapter 1, click on the link below the video. All right, we're on the sheet rounding by hand, and then we're going to go to the sheet called Excel Round. And this is one of the most important videos in this class. Rounding gets people in trouble not only when they're using Excel, but out there in the real world. We poor Americans don't know how to do math too well. So rounding is very important. And here's why. Why in the world do we have to round anyway? Well, the gas costs $3.799. There's no such thing as 9/10 of a penny, right? So because we don't have partial pennies, we have to round this. For income tax, you calculate your tax to be this, but you are not allowed to put that on your tax form. You actually have to round to the dollar. So here we round to the penny. Here we round to the dollar. And those are by far the most common rounding requirements that you'll see in business. However, sometimes with financial statements, you have this $4 million number, but we need to round to the 7. Now, you know, when I put this in edit mode, you know in this class, by this time in this class, after our last week's study, you know that why isn't there a dollar sign? Because that's formatting. That's number formatting. But anyway, that 7, sometimes you need to round your financial statement to the 1,000 position. So let's see how to do this. Here's our rounding rules by hand, and you can read that. I will demonstrate that right here. Here's our number we need to round. So number 1, here's number 1 right here. You select the position you want to round to. So I need to round to that 9. So if you're doing it by hand, you mark in your mind or on the piece of paper, that's the position. So I've done that here, right? Sometimes it's helpful when you're learning how to do it by hand to put a little line, right? Then, once you've marked the position, you look at the number directly to the right. So it's 9 we need to look at. And you ask the question, is this greater than or equal to 5? If it's greater than or equal to 5, then you hack everything off after the line and add 1 to that 9. So in this case, since we're adding 1 right there, you can't add a 1 there because it becomes 10, so this becomes 80. So when you're rounding to the penny here using a rounding rule, this becomes 380. Now, one important note here, and throughout these videos, always as we're going through the lecture, I always give you the little gotcha as we go along. Here's a problem you could run into. And I know when I first saw this, I was just like, what is going on? Now, I'm going to type a number in this cell, right? You can see, or let me type 3.799. No problem. If there's no number formatting, when you type a number, you'll see the decimals, right? But watch this. I'm going to hit the delete key. It's OK to format as you type. And some people do this. As soon as you type a dollar sign and then 3.799, you're telling Excel to add the currency formatting. It's called formatting as you type. So notice, I've typed that in. I'm going to Control Enter, and I see 380. You're like, what is going on? This is not what I typed in the cell. As we've seen in the class so far, you can look up in the formula bar and see the 3.799. But what happened is, by default, the currency format, when you type the dollar sign into the number, it automatically shows 2 decimals. The way to fix it is to increase the decimal up here. That's just a little, don't get tricked by number formatting. All right, here's our next example. So we have this 567 and 34, and you have to round it to the dollar. So rule number 1, pick the position. Draw a line. All the numbers, the number directly to the right, we ask our question. Is it greater than or equal to 5? That's not true. It's false. So the next question is it less than 5? That is true. So you hack off all the decimals after the line and keep that number the same. All right? So this number becomes 567. Now, we've done our 2 examples, right? Here, our digit we were looking at was greater than or equal to 5. Here, that little 3 right there, it was less than 5. Another way to think about that is this. You can say this lots of different ways. 5 or bigger. That means same thing as greater than or equal to 5. But those are all the digits, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then you have to hack everything off after the line or the position, the selected position, and add 1 to the selected position. If it's less than 5, that means you have a 4, 3, 2, or 1. Then you drop all the decimals after the selected position and don't do anything to the selected position. That just explicitly shows you the numbers and what you have to do. All right, so we did example number 1, gas. Example number 2, taxes. Financial statements. Here's our number. We have to round to the 1,000 position. So there it is, 1,000. So I look exactly to the right. That means I'm looking at 8. I ask the question, is it greater than or equal to 5? It is. So I don't hack everything off because these aren't decimals. These are actual integers. I turn them to zeros, and then I add 1 to there. So this becomes this. Now on financial statements, you may see it like this. 4, 5, 6, 8. And it would be a label like this. And they might, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to enter that number, maybe add accounting up here. And then at the top of the financial statement, you'd see it would say in thousands, or you might see this. Right? It's, whoops. I'm going to have to type an apostrophe, and then in parentheses, $000, close parentheses. The reason why is Excel thought it was a number, right? And so if you put an apostrophe before a number, then when you hit Control-Enter, it considers it text, and it's allowed to be in the cell. Now, notice that number. We talked about this in our week 00. That is not a number. It's a line to the left, which means it thinks it's text, right? So you may see it like this. You may also see in thousands. All right. Luckily, we don't have to do all this rounding by hand. OK, let's go over to this sheet, Excel round. All right, we're going to do the same 3 examples, and then we'll look at the rule for the round function. Now, luckily, there is a round function, and it will do, in just a couple minutes, we'll see how it will do 35 calculations in a whole column basically instantly, for example, in Payroll. But here's how it works. We have this number here, and we need to round it. So I'm going to use not the sum function or the average function. Mostly they name their function smartly, round. OK, I can remember that one. There's 2 arguments to it. The number means you can either click on a cell with a number, or later we'll see how to put a formula here, like in Payroll. You click, whatever it is, a number or a formula, it's just the thing you want to round, comma. And then you have to tell it num digits. That's the selected position. Now here's the memorization trick I use. I count from the decimal. 1, 2, because we need to round to the penny. So I just go 1, 2. That means I need to put a 2 here. So my memorization trick is I always remember the correct rule for a penny. All right? Counting 1, 2. What do you think it would be if we went to there? It would be 1, 2, 3. OK? All right, so enter. And we get it correct. The only reason why I'm showing the decimals is so that we prove to ourselves that it actually got changed, right? I could decrease the decimals, but I wanted to make sure that that actually changed. All right, now to the dollar. And we'll have lots of calculations in this class for income tax and other, where we have to round to the dollar. All right, so num digits, that's the selected position. Well, the way I memorized it is I always remembered the penny, 1, 2. Now notice up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You just keep counting out this way. Now in business, you usually don't count out that way very far. You just get to 2, right? But 1, 2, 3. What's the pattern? 1, 2, 3. Well, let's go backwards. 3, 2, 1. So that means if we're going this way, we're always subtracting 1. 3, 2, 1. And what comes before that? 0. So that's what you put for to the dollar or the ones position. All right. Finally, here equals round. There's the number, comma, and num digits. Remember, that's selected position. Well, I always go back. OK, 1, 2. So 2 would be the penny. Well, now I'm going to have to go backwards. 2, 1, 0. Minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. Now you could go up to Google and type in Excel round function num digits, and it would give you a whole listing of it. But that little memorization trick is pretty good. All right. Now again, you wouldn't usually see it like this. They would indicate those 3 missing zeros in either a label or something like that. So the question is, do we see the pattern? Yeah. 1, 2 for the penny. Backwards, you go 2, 1, 0, minus 1, etc. Here are some rules specifically for the round function. There's some possibilities for num digits. Again, there's a memorization trick. That's just what we went through. Now let's do some practice. Let's do it to the penny. Equals round, comma 2. Now, with simple functions like sum and average and round, you actually never have to put the closed parenthesis. You can just hit enter, or I'm going to hit control enter to show you up here that it actually did put it in. Now, F2, notice that's a relative cell reference, right? So if I have a whole column, which we're going to have in just a moment here, right? I can actually copy this down. Now, the ones down here to the dollar and millions, we're not going to have a 2. So I'm just going to copy it down to there. And sure enough, it worked perfect. Notice, whoops. Notice that if we did it with our eyes, right? We're rounding to the 5. We look there, it's a 1, so that's less than 5. So we hack everything off and leave that as a 5, right? All right, so to the dollar equals round. I use my little memorization trick. 1, 2, so it's 2, 1, 0. And then to the millions, actually in financial statements, you go to Yahoo Finance or whatever, or Google Finance. A lot of financial statements are listed in millions. All right, so round, here's the number, comma. All right, 0, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, minus 5, minus 6. Wow, minus 6. So that's using our little trick there. Now, OK, so now here's what to watch out for. So we have, and I mentioned this last week when we were talking about number formatting. It basically is the big Achilles heel of most people that use Excel in the world. They get tricked by number formatting all the time. So here's what people do. They're like, oh, income taxes, no problem. I know how to decrease the decimal. This is a sum function, by the way. All right, so you got that? So they highlight this, and they come up here, and they decrease the decimals. And like, woohoo, that was easy. $172. That's what I put on my tax form. Here's the problem with that. And we mentioned this last chapter 00. This formula is never, ever going to look at the number formatting. It's always going to look at the numbers underneath, right? So even though we decrease the decimals, I can click here and see the number up in the formula bar or hit F2, right? So someone comes along and they go 46, 101, 26, right? They're looking at this, not knowing that there's something underneath. And of course, the person who did this, they just decreased the decimals and thought it was 172. But these numbers are actually what we see, 46, 101, 26. If you can do that in your head, that's pretty good. Alt equals enter. So there's a mistake. That's what we want to watch out for. Don't use number formatting to round, right? Because these are the numbers we see. These over here have something different. Here's actually, so right, if I was to increase the decimals here, that's actually what's in the cell. Now I'm going to leave that there. I re-put these numbers over here so you can see this is income taxes without number formatting, and here's the round. So we're required to round each individual one. So I'm going to go round, comma, and this is for income tax, so comma 0. I'm just going to copy it down. And then I'm going to come here, Alt equals. OK, and so that is the amount we should put on our tax form. Each individual amount was rounded, so it was entered in, and then we added them up. Here's why round is so amazing, right? So we're in the payroll department, right? Dylan, Ian, Sarah, Maria, Daniel, Elizabeth, Rose, all of these people have their gross pay, and we need to calculate our tax deduction. There's the gross, there's the tax rate. So equals, now right off the bat, you can probably guess there's a bunch of extra decimals here, and that's going to cause a problem. And really the rule is when you're multiplying and dividing decimals, you run the risk of having some extra decimals hanging out there. And since pennies is the smallest unit of money we have, so for payroll you do deal with pennies, right? So your paycheck has pennies. So we have to round here. So I'm going to use the round. That is a relative cell reference. As I copy it down, I want it to move so that each employee here, we look at their gross times. So this example here, we're not putting just a straight number. We're actually putting a formula, right? As we copy it down. But that, as I copy it down, I don't want the dancing ants to move as we go down. I want it locked. So I hit the F4 key. Comma, and this is penny, so we put a 2. This is why it's so amazing. What do we just do? Without the ability to do the round function, we would have to actually manually round all of these, right? And then fill out the paychecks or whatever. All right, I'm going to double click and send this down, right? As long as there's something to the left, then you can just double click this little fill handle with your angry rabbit, and it goes all the way down. Now, so we just copied that down the column. Whenever you copy down a formula down a column like this, I always like to go to the bottom, and you always should go to the bottom. Click on the last one and hit the F2 key. We want to verify that this formula actually worked when we copied it down. Remember, if we're in charge of the spreadsheet, we want to verify. Look at that. That is just amazing. It got the right gross pay, and it's still locked on E40. All right, I'm going to click Escape. Now, that's amazing because it's so fast. And here's what it does, right? Let me zoom in just a little bit here, right? What would we have to do if we didn't have this awesome round function? There it is. Each one of these things, right, that we multiplied, we then have to go manually do our rounding. So the round function is amazing because it'll save so much time. I mean, rounding is one of those just tedious tasks. Now here's why rounding is so important, or knowing how to round is so important. Now let's do this same formula again here. Comma, I'm sorry, the one cell to my left, that's the gross pay, times, and I'm going to click on my tax rate, and I'm going to make sure and lock that with the F4 key, comma 2. Control Enter, and double click and send it down. Now, here's why it's so important to round, right? So over here, I made the same calculation here. And this whole column, what I did is, we did this example just a moment ago. All I did was apply number formatting. So I went Control-Shift-4 to apply the currency number formatting. So why is it so important that we used round, whereas someone else might make this calculation and just format it? Let's come down to the bottom. Keyboard shortcut Alt equals, verify it so it looks good. Tab, 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 Alt equals. And that's why it's so important, because the correct number to report, each one of these pennies is going to be on a individual paycheck. This amount will go on a tax form, right? Over here, with number formatting only, there's going to be a few paychecks that are not right, and the total on the taxes is not going to be right. Now, a few pennies does not matter on the bottom line, your profit or the employee's pay. It is the trust. If someone finds or sees that you're a penny off, they're not going to trust your ability to do calculations in Excel. So that's why knowing when and how to use the round function is so important. It will save us time, and knowing when to use it and how to use it is very important, so we make accurate calculations. So for payroll, and invoicing and other business calculations that require that you round. If you don't round or you make the incorrect number, people will not trust your ability. Now here are the rules. Let's see if I can. Okay, so here's the rules for when you must round. Basically, it comes down to, are you required to round, right? So if you have a line item on an invoice or a paycheck or something like that, almost all money calculations, when you're multiplying, you're going to have to round. And you will use the formula in a subsequent formula result in a subsequent. I didn't say that right. You will use the formula result in a subsequent formula. Now, what does that mean? Just right here, that's a formula. Control Enter. That 251.74 is a formula result, and this is a subsequent formula that's using that. So all of these, if we were never ever going to use them in some other formula, meaning the results of these formulas are used in another formula, we really wouldn't have to round. So that's number 2. Let's look at example of that. Here's our gross pay. I don't know what it is. It's 5248 and 25. I'm going to do the tax deduction. This times this. All right, now I'm going to Control-Shift F4, and this should come out 49, right? Control-Shift F4. Notice that that 1, 1, that's still in the cell. So if I ever use that somewhere else, the formula will be using the 1, 1, not just the 4, 9. But currency format, Control-Shift 4, and there it is, that 49. Actually, this is fine if you're never going to use it in another formula. Let's just say you make this calculation and then you write it somewhere else in some report somewhere. So that's perfectly all right. This is what the problem is. Equals this times this. That's the gross pay. There's the tax rate. I need to lock that, F4. I'm going to drag it down. And then I'm going to check this last one. Looks good. Alt equals. Right, and we've already done this a few times, but I'm just emphasizing 0.36, 7.36, 2.12. See, I'm typing in what I see. Enter. Alt equals. So they're off. All right. So this is a formula result. That little 736. That's a subsequent formula. Because we're using these in a subsequent formula, we actually have to round. Now, instead of hard coding these in here, I'm going to do the right formula, equals round. This little number here can be a number or a formula. This times this. And I'm going to lock that right there with the F4 key, comma 2, because it's to the penny. Payroll deductions are to the penny. Income taxes are to the 0. Copy this down. And there we have. That's how we should make this calculation, not like that. Again, formula result, subsequent formula, and you're multiplying decimals, or you're required to round. You should use round. Now, one other important point here, right here. That number is already rounded, right? So that's the point at which you should do your rounding when you're multiplying or dividing, right? Or you have some number over here that has to be rounded. But what about this? A lot of times I get tests handed in and then people put round functions everywhere. Why does this not need round? And the reason is, oh yeah, because these are already rounded. So those are already rounded, so you don't need it here. Right? So that's number 3 up here, rules for when you must use round function. If the number's already rounded, don't use a round function like for sum. All right, here's a homework problem. And I'm only showing you this homework problem because it's so easy to do, right? They give you this huge list. Now, the tricky part is going to be typing in the numbers, right? I'm actually going to increase the decimals. OK. So you have all these extra little pieces of pennies over here that we don't have. We don't have partial pennies, so we have to round. You have to type all these in, but once you type them in, it's easy. A lot of times, if you're out there working, you get a data set from some database or spit out from some computer, right? And so they have some extraneous pennies. But once you get all the numbers here, it's easy. Equals round, right? So in section, I think it's 1.3, you know, I assign like problems 27 to 66. So that's a lot of problems. But, you know, if they're all like this, it's pretty easy. So relative cell reference, comma, and this one's to the penny. So 2. Double click or drag it down. Now here's a good trick. We'll see some. Let's just say we want to add both of these. Now we've been selecting one cell in Alt equals, right? But you can select 2 cells below and Alt equals. Now there is a difference. When you highlight more than one cell, it automatically puts it in there. It doesn't give you a chance to verify that it's correct. So I always you know, double check it, right? And oftentimes that's why I will simply put 1 in, Alt equals, verify, OK, those are the right cell references. They are relative, so when I copy it over here, the little box, the little dancing ants will move. Control Enter, and then you can copy it over. OK? And again, we don't have to use round on the sum because all of these are rounded, right? 92, 94. That's what you don't want to do. This is what you want to do. OK, one last thing. When you get numbers from somewhere else, and you're worried about rounding, you might check the number formatting. Now, we talked about this in the number formatting video last chapter. If you apply the general number format up here, it wipes away all the number formatting, like decreased decimal or currency or counting or whatever number formatting, right? So you might check before you do anything. Now these numbers I put up here, no required to round, right? So we can just add these, right? And that's fine. But you might check them. But what about these ones over here, right? I'm just going to come here and add them, right? But before you do that, you might check just for a moment. Now you can do this. We know there's a keyboard shortcut for undo, so why not just look? If these numbers like came in and you've never seen them before, just apply some general, and you're like, oh, look at that. There's all sorts of trouble, right? Control Z immediately will undo it. But we know that there's some trouble, so now I know I'm going to use this in a subsequent calculation, and it's money. It needs to be rounded, so I'm just going to go ahead and round it over in a different column. Now, look, right here, this is number format. It looks like it didn't change anything, but it did, right? If you wipe away to general, you can see there's lots of extra stuff there. Alt equals. That I don't like that right there. That when I just put a formula, this is new in 2010, it automatically puts something there. That's really terrible. I'm going to delete that. Alt equals. All right, so the last point here is just if you get some numbers from somewhere else, check them out before you do anything. All right, that's a lot about rounding, and we'll use rounding throughout in a lot of chapters will be required to round. All right, next video we'll talk about some tricks for adding and subtracting. All right, see you next video.